Jackson State will still be combining spectacle with substance in the TC era, and also JJ Davis leaves Norfolk just as they're bringing in a lot of young talent. Oh yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked on HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, I'm Deion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked on HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives, which you can find right here at the bottom of the screen. Or if you're on the audio side of things, don't forget to add the S on the end. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel yet again. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more when you visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started, and we'll talk about them more as we progress with the show. But first, I want to start off with Jackson State, because this is a transitional period for Jackson State, but they hope it's not a transitional period that ends off poorly. One of the things that they are carrying over from the Deion Sanders era to the TC era is that they are going to continue to combine spectacle with substance. Now, before we get into that too deeply, I did want to briefly touch on the fact that we are changing plans today. I know I said that Gerald Huggins would be on the show, but he's actually live in Vegas at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and things like, you know, when you get into games and situations like this, plans change, and that's what happens. So we're looking to get him tomorrow morning, Friday morning, on the show. So fingers crossed we're able to get that done, and then that's when we'll talk about the Shrine Bowl and then the Senior Bowl, which will be the day after that. But let's get back to Jackson State, because like I told you, some people are focused on spectacle. Some people are focused on making sure that they get their name out, get a little bit of buzz, and I understand why you would want to do that. That's just called marketing. There's nothing wrong with it. I know when you say it like, oh, you're worried about getting your buzz and things of that nature. I'm here to tell you right now, marketing and getting social media buzz, those are just part of the game. You know, that's how I look at it. It's not something to where you're all about the flash and none of the actual substance, but you have to make sure that your substance is together. I will never look at a program who is trying to get social media marketing up and say, oh, you're focused on the wrong thing. Because I will always assume that they are focused on bringing in the best talent. I'm assuming that they are focused on getting the substance together. However, being focused on getting it done and actually getting it done are two different things. So you have to make sure that your substance is together, because otherwise you'll look like a program that's all about talking a good game but not playing a good game. And then also, you just have to make sure that you're ready for the limelight that you're bargaining for. Because if I get a bunch of shine, let's just imagine that the Browns from back in the day had a lot of shine, and they just was like, oh, I want to make sure that all eyes are on me, and then they go 0-16. That's not what you want. You want to make sure that your team is prepared and ready for the limelight that you're bargaining for. Jackson State has done that. Jackson State has talked a good game. They have played a good game. They have beat everybody in the SWAC. They haven't lost a SWAC game in 2 years. They've done all of that. Now, I don't know if they'll be able to replicate the on-field success. That's still to be determined. Of course, they hope so. But right now, if I'm looking at the spectacle, they got it going. If I'm looking at the substance of the recruiting class, they also have it going. So let's go ahead and start off with the spectacle. Everybody knows that yesterday was National Signing Day. That was the big news of the first day of the month, right? You know, you got Black History Month starting, you got National Signing Day, and you got Brady announcing his retirement. Those are three huge stories that were breaking on that day. But it wasn't just that. They didn't just stop at National Signing Day when it came to Jackson State. Let me tell you what they did, because they had a meet and greet. In this meet and greet, they actually did 4 different things. They had TC Taylor announce his recruiting class. They had TC Taylor announce his coaching staff. And then also they had them roll out the schedule for 2023. And this was all while fans were included. It was a free event. Everybody was welcome. You could just go. As long as you were in Jackson, Mississippi, you could go. But it wasn't just about that. You also had them try to come in and get donations as well. It's a free event, but you're encouraging donations. So I thought it was just a way to really make things special. It was a way to really set up a community feel, which they already have done, of course. But it was a way to make everybody feel included on a big time moment. Of course, you could come in and say, well, we signed this guy, that guy, and that guy. People do that on social media all the time. And a lot of times it's kind of hard to keep up with. Even with your favorite team, it can be hard to keep up with until you find that one account that lists everybody. But instead you say, you know what? At the end of the day, around 6 o'clock, we're going to bring you all in and we're going to give you all of this, what is kind of exclusive news. You're the first ones to hear this news. You're the first one to see our full recruiting class. You're the first one to hear about the coaching staff. You're going to be the first one to hear about the official schedule. All of these things, it's kind of exclusive. That's a big spectacle. And when I say substance, remember, I'm not talking about the fact that, oh, they're going to go undefeated and swipe play again. That's not what I mean in substance. That's still later down the line. I don't know how that's going to turn out. We'll all see that. But I do know about the recruiting class. Of course, this is all about prospects, but I'm not going to include that in here because that's what recruiting is. Recruiting is about prospects. Nobody knows anything for sure when it comes to recruiting, but we can grade based off of potential. And I think they did a really good job including a nice recruiting class, which is a mix of good transfers and then also a mix of young players as well. So, of course, you have guys like Isaiah Guthrie and you have Seven McGee who's able to come in, and they're transfers from Oregon and Delaware State who you feel like are going to be immediate impact players. And then you got a guy like Tristan Sion, who is a freshman, an incoming freshman, a true freshman at that. So you have a good mix of guys who came in December. That's a nice start. But then when you look specifically to the guys who came in this later class or either January mid-year transfers or just February signees right now, you still have that quality. So I'm looking at Phillip Webb, who is an edge player from LSU. And the thing about him is they had a lot of talent in front of him that's returning. So it wasn't just that, oh, he's no good, but he had injuries that he had to deal with. You had a freshman who came in and looks like a stud, Harold Perkins. That guy looks phenomenal when I watch him. And you have two other edge players where it just starts to get a little crowded, you know? And when you're crowded, it's like, okay, I got 3 years of eligibility left. He dealt with a couple of injuries here and there, like I said. I'm going to go look for a change of scenery. And that change of scenery is Jackson State. And that's a player who he's generated a lot of excitement. People are excited about him. It's just other things off the field that weren't, I don't want to call it off the field, but it was health more so that kept him from achieving what they feel like he could have achieved. Now you come to Jackson State, that's a ton of potential. You have him for potentially 3 years. That's the type of recruiting class you're like, oh, okay, I like that. You know, you got Ahmad Miller, which is Aubrey Miller's little brother, coming in. Then you also have Nareek Sharp, who is a 3-star cornerback who has some Power 5 offers. They're doing a pretty good job of trying to restack that defensive backfield as well. They're doing all the right things, bringing in 7 offensive linemen because you know that's the foundation of a good offense. Good offenses with bad offensive lines typically tend to crumble. It's just about if you find the right person to poke at those flaws, to what's the word I'm looking for? Expose those flaws in that offensive line. This is a pretty good recruiting class, and it still stands for everything that Jackson State was in the Deion Sanders era. This first step of the TC era sounds like you're combining substance with spectacle. We've seen that for the last 2 years. Now let's see in the fall if that same mix, that same recipe results in the same experiences that you had in 2021 and 2022. And going forward, we're going to continue with the National Signing Day, but we're going to talk about a team who lost something, and that's Norfolk State. JJ Davis is gone. Yes, JJ Davis left on National Signing Day. We're going to talk about the ramifications of this move and then also talk about all the other talent that they brought in as we continue with Locked on HBCU. Before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, which you can see right here at the bottom because they also have a graphic on our screen. So FanDuel, make every moment more. They are the official sponsor of the Locked On Network. And listen, if you got to put some money down on the Super Bowl, go to BetOnline. Make sure that you're in a legal area. We're going to have all of the states that are allowed to have FanDuel and online betting in that facet down below in the description. So make sure you check and make sure that you can get down with FanDuel. But if you can, I think it's a no-brainer, man. They have the best odds. You're looking at the fact that they have the money line, the single game parlays. You have everything you could possibly need for a betting man or woman. I don't know any other place. I talk to my friends, and FanDuel is always one of the first places that they say, hey, if I want to get in on some online betting, where should I go? They always say FanDuel. That's one of the first names they say, and now they're down with our network. So it's a great pleasure to talk about them. And if you put a $5 bet down, you can get $150 back in free bets. It's an easy decision, easy decision. Win or lose, you get money back. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more. And as we continue rolling with today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen of the day, make sure you're checking out the Locked on NFL Draft podcast because they are still in Mobile. I think the Locked on NFL podcast is in Mobile as well. So they're going to have live shows. If you can't catch the live show, make sure you're checking them out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, including this app right here, whatever you're listening or watching me on, right? Make sure you check out Locked on NFL and Locked on NFL Draft. That's live at the Senior Bowl. And I want to talk about National Signing Day. We're going to keep rolling. And I see JJ Davis. He's entered the transfer portal on February 1st. Now, signing day is supposed to be all about bringing in new talent, but not if you're Norfolk State. You know, it's a little bit bitter. You're going to be losing a player who you felt could have maybe been a key part of your offense and probably hope that he could have been a key part of your offense going into next season. So I don't say this to be funny. It's just, this is rough. It's kind of like getting bad news on your birthday. It's kind of like having a fight with your girl before you're about to go out. Like, you still want to have a good time and you might still enjoy certain aspects, but in the back of your mind, you might be thinking about, man, she really said that. Oh man, that really happened. Oh man, JJ Davis is really gone. And they didn't get any running backs. They didn't do that. So this is kind of bittersweet. And the thing about it is, I feel like it's not as big of a deal because, not big of a deal as in actuality, but as big of a news story, I should say. Because, yeah, in 2021, he was dominant. But in 2022, it was like, there was a fall off. There was a lot of expectation. This was a disappointing season for Norfolk State last year. It just was for the team. But when you look at one of the more disappointing aspects, it's the fact that JJ Davis just wasn't as effective in 2022 as he was the year prior. And I don't know how much injuries had to play a part in that because he did miss some time due to injuries. But the stats are the stats. And the fact that whether he was hurt or not, it still had that same level of disappointment. It doesn't mean you can't understand, but you were still disappointed. And that's how it happened. So let's look at his 2 seasons because Pookie Carter's gone at quarterback. Right, he left. So last year you're looking to have a new quarterback, but you're also looking at JJ Davis to come in and be the engine of your offense. He was predicted to be the offensive player of the year. So the MEAC as a conference also had high expectations for him. And you can see why, because I look at last year, it's getting so hard for me to say last year versus this year. And like, we're in 2023. So now I'm trying to say this year is the upcoming season, but my mind of saying this year is still on professional football because it's not done yet. And because that's not done yet, when I say this year and I say last year, it's all mixed up. So excuse me if I fumble with that a couple of times over the next couple of weeks, but I'm going to try to just say the years that it happened. You look at 2021. In 2021, the guy had over 800 yards. He wasn't getting that many carries. He only had 123 carries, averaging 7 yards per pop, a touchdown every 12 carries. This is a player who was explosive. This is a player who he popped. He was a first-team All-MEAC running back, led the conference in rushing. And mind you, he only had 123 rushes. So this is a player who had a lot of potential, not even potential. He showed you what he was. And you felt like, okay, all he has to do is continue. At the worst, just stay the same. But then in 2022, it all came down. It all came crashing down. Yes, he only played 7 games. So instead of having 7 yards a pop, he only has 7 games. Instead of having 7 yards a pop, he had only 19 yards per game. These are things that if you would have told me this at the beginning of the season, I'd have been like, what? Would have been shocked. Everybody would have been shocked. And I know what you might be thinking. You detail these seasons. You detail how he regressed, or at least statistically he regressed, because I don't know everything that was going on. And I want to shoot him the benefit of the doubt because you don't think that somebody should go from 2021 to 2022 in such a dramatic fashion and just fall down to how he did. So I'll just say statistically because other things were probably going on. I'm going to shoot him some slack. And I'm going to say things were probably going on. But you look at it like, okay, whatever. But I think the fact that you look at the difference between the 2 seasons he was at Norfolk State, the only 2 seasons he was there, and that creates a lot of intrigue, because if 2022 never happens, this is a huge news story. JJ Davis is gone. What is Norfolk State going to do? But because 2022 did happen, people feel like, okay, this is a blow that you can really take on. But let's say 2021 never happened, and 2022 was the only season that he had. I know I'm throwing a bunch of numbers out, but let's say his great season happened and his bad season didn't. People are blowing this up like, what is Norfolk going to do? Let's say his bad season happened and the great one never did. Now it's a story that probably doesn't even make back page. This is just another player who happened to be transferring. He was 5th in rushing last year in yards per game. So that's why you look at it, it creates the intrigue of not only how do I feel about it, but then also, well, what's the market going to be? Where is he going to go? Because are people going to judge him based off of his great season, his redshirt freshman season? Or are people going to judge him off of his redshirt sophomore season where he struggled? And this isn't the NFL where you're trying to negotiate a price and whatnot. It's just about where is he going to go, because he has the type of play, or he's the type of player and has the type of performance in his redshirt freshman year that says, okay, you have the potential to move up, go to a bigger FCS, maybe go to a low level FBS, right? But then that second season, it's like, I don't know. But I will tell you this, I do believe that Norfolk State was caught off guard by this move. I don't think this is something that they felt the whole time coming, especially not on signing day, because they didn't recruit a singular running back. And I know he wasn't a great part of the offense last year, but I would think that if JJ Davis was leaving, and you probably hope that he was able to bounce back, but if you knew JJ Davis was leaving, you would have recruited at least one running back. I would assume so. But I'll tell you what they did bring in. They did bring in a lot of new quarterbacks, and they brought in a lot of young talent. I'm going to talk about what exactly this could mean for Dawson Odoms, and just talk about the team in general and their recruiting class as we continue forward with Locked on HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, shout out to all my segment 3 folks, and we're still pushing forward with Norfolk State. We're still going to be talking about them Spartans because Norfolk State has loaded up on quarterbacks and young talent. That feels like the focus. If I had to describe, hey, what did Norfolk State bring up? Can you make it real quick? I got to run. They got quarterbacks and young talent. I'll see you later. That's exactly how I would describe the recruiting class of the Spartans in 2023. They have 39 players, 39 new players, and 17 of them will be at spring practice. And of the 17, I'm really getting number based today. I did the whole 2021, 2022 thing. I'm taking you down the breakdown of it. But look, you got 39 new players coming in to Virginia, right? You're coming into Virginia to play for Norfolk State. 17 of those players are going to be early enrollees, players who are going to be there for spring practice. And of those 17, 3 of them are going to be quarterbacks. Now, I believe that enrolling early is important for all positions. I really do. I think it's a bonus, an extra benefit. It allows you to get a jump on the playbook and things of that nature. I don't really see a downside in enrolling early. Oh, you got to miss prom? Sorry. That's it. But on a serious note, enrolling early is something I would recommend for everybody if you can do it. And if you feel like you're ready, go ahead and enroll early. But for the quarterback position, I feel like it's very important. It's important for everybody else. It's a bonus for everybody else. But it's one of those things that you can't make up missing time in spring practice as a quarterback, because there's so much responsibility placed on you. There's so much you have to know, this, that, and the third. There's so many things that you need to do on a play-by-play basis that getting in as early as possible will always benefit you. That's why we hear things like he has a year in the system. That's why you hear those type of things. I've never heard a wide receiver had a year in the system. I just never have. And when you talk about a wide receiver who can make a jump from year 1 to 2, maybe he talks about chemistry with the quarterback, but the term you have a year in the system is kind of reserved for quarterbacks, and that's because of the responsibilities that they bear every single play, right? So let's look at the 3 quarterbacks, because they brought in 4. The only one who's not going to be there early is Nolan James, who was from, I hope I said this right, Phoebus High School in Hampton, Virginia. So he's a Virginia kid, but he's not going to be there early. He's going to get to enjoy his prom. But I'll tell you the 3 quarterbacks who will be there early. Mark Wagner II, a redshirt freshman out of the University of Virginia. And actually, he went to Phoebus High School as well, just a year prior. So in a way, Nolan James was his successor. And I don't know the exact story, but I would assume that they were in the locker rooms together. I would assume that they were in high school together, unless James just transferred in for his senior year, which we have seen before. So now James and Wagner will be sharing a locker room again just a year later, like they did in high school. Then you look at Ruben Lee, a redshirt freshman from the community college level. And I'm going to tell you what, when it comes to redshirt freshmen, you don't have experience. Like, you just don't. Let me tell you something about redshirts. If you're a redshirt freshman, that means you did not play a lot. You could play a little bit, but there is a limit on how much you can play and still reserve your redshirt. I think it's 4 games. If you don't play more than 4 games, you can still apply for a redshirt freshman or redshirt season your freshman year. But you don't play much. You just don't. You just don't see much action, and that means that you're not going to have a lot of experience, even though you're technically a year in college more than the true freshman who's coming in out of high school. The only edge you have is maybe some intangibles of being able to be around practice, be around in a collegiate program. You have a little bit more understanding of what you're getting yourself into. But overall, you really don't have too much experience. Like, you look at Lee, he's thrown less than 100 passes. And then the last guy who's coming in is Cameron Sapp from Florida A&M. He's been there for 4 years. Or 3 years, I believe. He's a he's a graduate transfer coming in. He don't have no experience either. And I don't say this to tear down the quarterback room. This is a very raw quarterback room, and that's not a critique. It's just a description. And why I describe it as so raw is because I don't want you to hear, oh, he's a grad transfer. I'm like, oh, Cameron Sapp, the guy I'm going to go to. Or it's the guy I feel like they should gravitate towards. He's from FAMU. He knows the HBCU life. He's a grad transfer. He has experience. That's not always the case. And also, just being raw just means that, hey, this is going to be an interesting battle, because nobody just has the huge experience edge on anybody. I could even see the freshmen coming in from high school. They all have about the same amount of experience, right? Because Sapp has 16 rushes and 9 passes to his name in 3 seasons. He hasn't played much at FAMU. He was reserve duty, essentially. And nothing wrong with that. I feel like I have to keep qualifying it. But that's just the truth. You have a quarterback who came from Virginia, wasn't starting, didn't play. You have a true freshman coming in from high school. Obviously, he's never played on the collegiate level. You have a player who's coming from the community college level but hasn't thrown 100 passes. That's not a lot of experience. And you have another guy who has been there for 3 years and has less passes than him. I can't wait to see how this breaks down. I don't want to say breaks up, but breaks down, right? So let's talk about the young players as well, because like I told you, they have quarterbacks and they have young talent. That's exactly what they're loading up on. Of the 39 players, only 4 of them are graduate transfers. Sapp's one of those 4, and I'm talking about experience, but I'm talking about actual youth in age. You're looking at a recruiting class that has 39 players. 4 of them are grad transfers. Outside of that 4, the other 35 have 3 years or more of eligibility left. 3 years or more. That's a lot. They're either redshirt sophomores or younger. There's no juniors in this class. There's no seniors in this class. It's graduate transfers and redshirt sophomores and below. That's it. 22 of them are freshmen coming out of high school. This is the type of class that promotes a foundation kind of similar to North Carolina Central. And I don't know if this is like when we say you recruit to slay the beast. I don't know if that's what they're doing, but they might be following the mode of, you know what, we're going to get young players. We're going to get people who can come in and we're going to set foundations. I told you, 4 years after Davius Richard was recruited, 4 years after Khalil Baker was recruited, you see a national championship, the Celebration Bowl victory for North Carolina Central, and maybe Norfolk State is trying to replicate that success. But I'll tell you what, this also feels like a refresh. And that means 2 things, because I don't know if I would refresh. I've heard a lot of people say that Dawson Odoms could be on the hot seat. I heard a couple of people, right? And it's not guaranteed, but it means 2 things. 1, Dawson Odoms does not feel like he's on the hot seat. Could be, but he does not feel like his job is in jeopardy, because if his job was in jeopardy, why would you bring in a bunch of freshmen? I feel like people whose job are in jeopardy, you're going to bring in a bunch of transfers who have a lot of experience, some people who maybe played a couple of years, and now you want to get them a bigger opportunity. I want to bring those type of players in. I'm not bringing in a bunch of freshmen. I'm not overloading things with young players. That's not what I'm doing if my job is in jeopardy. But then secondly, it could just mean that Dawson Odoms doesn't think like me. Maybe Dawson Odoms is a bigger gambler than I am. Maybe he says, you know what? My job might be in jeopardy, but I'm going to go ahead and start this cycle over. I'm going to go ahead and just restart things because they did lose a lot of talent. JJ Davis isn't the only one. I can't think of all the names off the top of my head, but JJ Davis and Brandon Savage are two of the ones that really jumped to my mind. You're losing a lot of talent and you're bringing in a lot of young players, and maybe you're gambling on that. If you are, woo, that might be bigger odds than anything on FanDuel, but we'll see. We'll see. Tomorrow's episode, I'm still crossing my fingers that we will have Gerald Huggins on to recap the the East-West Shrine Bowl. I keep wanting to call it the NFLPA Bowl, but the East-West Shrine Bowl is tonight at 7:30 Central Time. 7:30 Central Time, the East-West Shrine Bowl will be on NFL Network, so make sure you guys are checking that out. Gerald Huggins and the Draft HBCU gang will be down there in Vegas. They're there right now, and on tomorrow's episode, we'll be bringing him in to recap that game and then also preview the Senior Bowl. So I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. I hope you'll be back tomorrow for your second listen. Make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL and Locked On NFL Draft. A lot of the hosts, and I know the two hosts from the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, are live in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Let's listen in and see if they're talking about Isaiah Land and Aubrey Miller. And Aubrey Miller has been clacking people. But in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.